I'll probably cop some flack for this, but I genuinely think the Call of Duty franchise has some excellent single player campaigns, the Modern Warfare series being my favourite. But I'm not talking about this 2019 reboot. I'm talking about Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare 2, and yes, even 3. The originals with Soap, Ghost, and the introduction of Captain Price as the icon we know today. One of the first campaigns that genuinely shook the foundations of what I expected from storytelling in an FPS. So coming into this game, to say my expectations were already high is an understatement, which means I'm probably going to be harsher on this than most. I wasn't even planning on playing through this one, but with Zampella's passing, and the recent Steam sale dropping it to a historical low, I couldn't say no. Thank you, Lord Gaben. So with all that in mind, this is my retrospective review of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019. Visually, the game is great, but I'll be honest, I expected it to look a bit better. We're at a point where visual fidelity has started to plateau, so coming back to a 2019 title doesn't hit quite as hard as it once did. That said, when the game wants to impress, it absolutely delivers. The close-up cutscenes are excellent. Facial detail, lighting, animation, it all holds up really well. Character design is solid too. Price looks great, just noticeably younger than expected. Still, the beard, the presence, and that accent are all there.
Captain Price.
Sergeant Garrick.
You with me?
Something I really enjoyed coming back to were those quotes on death. It's such a small detail, but it adds a lot of identity, especially when they mix in character quotes, which helps to immerse you further. Environmental storytelling is also really strong. Levels are short, but packed with detail, most of which you'll probably miss on a first run. In classic COD fashion, the direction is where the game really shines. At its best, this feels like a proper modern war film. Raw, tense, and unfiltered. Absolute cinema. But this is also where it starts to clash with itself. Because in trying to be realistic, it sometimes hurts gameplay clarity. Some sections are just too dark. Not atmospheric, but actually hard to see. And to be fair, this isn't just a game issue. Movies do it all the time too. But it's always frustrating. In real life, your eyes would adjust. But here it feels like information is being limited artificially. The tunnel sections in the Wolf's Den mission are a prime example of this. The same applies to night vision and undercover sequences too. Missions where peripheral vision, though important, is blocked. It works for immersion, but in terms of gameplay, it just feels restrictive. And something else I have to mention, why is this game 220 gigs? Even compared to other massive games, that's huge. I assume the multiplayer maps are the culprit, but even if you're just here for the campaign, you have to install everything. It's not a deal breaker, but definitely something to keep in mind. Starting with the excellent sound design. It's one of those things that's hard to describe, but everything just sounds right. Gunfire, reloads, environmental audio, it all has weight and impact.
They're taking cover in the buildings!
The best way I can describe it is, it's like a really high-end mechanical keyboard. Everything feels crisp, satisfying, and responsive. Spatial audio is also a standout, and that makes sense given how important multiplayer is in this game, and luckily, the campaign gets to reap the rewards of that work. The music is where things get interesting. Compared to the originals, it's a lot more varied. Those older games were consistent and incredibly memorable, but they played it fairly safe. Here, it feels like the composer had something to prove, and for the most part, it works. There's definitely something iconic about the originals, but here Sarah Schachner really pushes the boundaries of what you'd expect from a Call of Duty soundtrack. There's more range, more experimentation, and I genuinely appreciate that. It might not have the same powerful identity as the second game with Hans Zimmer's work, but it's still damn solid, just in a different way. When it comes to voice acting, it's exactly what you'd expect at this level, even if some lines come off a bit cheesy. Price does sound different.
Alex and Commander Karim's forces have destroyed General Barkov's forward operations base, temporarily limiting Russian air capability in Urzikstan. We need to move fast.
But he's instantly recognizable. That accent carries a lot of weight, and it works even for those really attached to the original. Other characters are a bit more mixed. Garrick feels a bit one-dimensional, but I think that's fine, since Gaz barely gets mentioned in COD 4. Alex, who kinda reminds me of Troy Baker, feels like he's missing something emotionally. There's a moment where I expected a much stronger reaction, but it just never really happens. Farah is interesting mainly because of her backstory, but as a character, she feels a bit on the nose. They lean heavily into the freedom fighter archetype, but I think the story would have hit harder if they gave her more human moments, especially when around her brother. A bit more vulnerability or internal conflict to balance out that hardened leader persona. That said, for a Call of Duty campaign, this is probably already asking a lot. It's been a long time since I properly played a Call of Duty campaign, so coming back to this definitely took some adjustment. It's a blast, but it's definitely different. I'm not sure if it's just me, but it feels like there's a bit of floatiness in the aiming and movement. It's not bad, but I think in trying to refine the formula, it feels like it's lost some of that old school arcadey charm. They've clearly leaned more into realism here, and while the action is still fast paced, intense and polished, it doesn't feel as snappy or reactive as the older games. This feels less like a classic run and gun Call of Duty and more like a modern, more grounded take. Controls also didn't fully land for me either. The default setup makes use of extra mouse buttons, which might be efficient, but I always found it awkward for my hand when trying to use them. Again, it's not bad, just different. And I do need to reiterate, the moment-to-moment gameplay is still excellent. At its core, Call of Duty is a shooter, one that's built around multiplayer. As a result, even the best campaigns have always felt more like a way to introduce you to the mechanics before you jump into the main experience. But as someone who prefers single player, the highlights are when the game changes things up. Moments where you manually pilot drones, or guiding an ally to safety.
Go now.
I don't have someone else.
Other end.
You.
Or marking targets for missile strikes. And of course, the gunship sequence that brings back those classic AC-130 vibes.
Target is smoked. Take out that enemy armor. Reloading. Stand by.
Modern Warfare 2019 adds variety without taking away from the core shooter loop, and to the game's credit, it doesn't overuse these mechanics either. They come in, do their job, and move on, never overstaying their welcome, treading a fine line which the originals mastered, which kept the pacing tight and focused. Weapon variety is strong as always, with different sights and attachments expanding things further, and multiplayer is still somewhat active with an evident spike in March during the historical low price, but I stuck to the campaign. I did learn that the co-op mode does continue the story, but it's clearly built for a full squad, and apparently watching the cutscenes is probably the easiest way to catch that extra narrative context. This was the main reason I came back, and overall, it's good. I'd even say it's great in moments, especially once you get into the second act. But, and I hate saying this, it's just not the original trilogy, and that's probably nostalgia talking. I'm comparing it to something that can't really be recreated. Those original Modern Warfare games had something truly special. COD 4, Modern Warfare 2, they had moments that stuck with you, characters that became iconic, a tone that felt unforgettable. Characters like Soap and Ghost, and of course Price and Task Force 141. Stories that genuinely shocked me, betrayal that punched you in the gut. This game captures a lot of that identity, but it just never quite reaches the same heights. It just doesn't have that same magic. It's one of those you just had to be there things, something that's been lost to time. But the thing is, I think this will be that experience for others. For a new generation, this might be their Modern Warfare, the one that they'll think back to fondly. And there's definitely something really nice about that. Now, to be fair, and removing those nostalgia goggles for a moment, the game does do a lot right. At its best, it feels like a proper modern war film. Raw, grounded, and visceral, especially in missions like the Mansion Defense, which feel straight out of something like 13 Hours or Warfare. Some story moments genuinely caught me off guard too. The Farah origin missions stand out in particular, grittier, darker, and more confronting than expected. In considering the series' history with controversial moments, I probably shouldn't have been surprised. It also explores more uncomfortable, morally grey territory too, something that actually reminded me of Andor.
End of the day, someone has to make the enemy scared of the dark. We get dirty, and the world stays clean. That's the mission.
I think it shows the potential for a longer campaign in this style, something that if done right, could be really impactful. First-person storytelling might not always be the strongest, but it is one of the most immersive, and this game leans into that well. The story starts fairly standard. fast, explosive, a bit tropey, but once it gets going, things pick up quickly. Set piece moments are strong, but not as large scale as previous titles. The writing is solid though, and the ending lands nicely, especially if you recognize certain names with a few subtle fan service moments scattered in too. If you're looking to relive the original Modern Warfare trilogy, you're better off going back to those. But if you don't mind a reimagining with a few new characters and surprises added in, something a bit more grounded, gritty and immersive, there's still a very good campaign here. And if you're here for multiplayer, you've probably already stopped watching, which is fair enough. It may not reach the same heights or capture that same magic, but it does tell its own story, one that I'm sure will have its own audience. So with that said, I can definitely still recommend playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019 today. If you've managed to sit through this whole video, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to let me know what else you'd like to see in the comments. Hopefully, I'll catch you in the next one.